I think we should dive in, right? We have basically 8 points that I want to talk about today. And our meeting today is about organization and pedagogical documentation. I think it's the last meeting where we're talking about more like organizational things and practical things, and then in the next meetings we dive into a more theoretic thing about like how we teach, why we teach, and the whole pedagogical thing, and then the last two ones we have about social media branding, which are pretty intense meetings too. So this meeting, we're talking about how we organize ourselves, like here as teachers physically. And this topic is like news for me to be talking to people about this because, like, I'm an ADHD Sagittarius hot mess. Like I'm all over the place technically, but when it like if you look around, there's things all over the house that are mine, and my husband's constantly like, oh my God, because he's the one that cleans the house. But with my job, with my work, I am like spotless. And I think that is so important to have a sustainable journey in teaching. Like we have to have our shit together. We have to have our pedagogical documentation and organization together, or else like we will be struggling with all the rest, for example, that we're going to talk about in the following meetings. So we can't have student-led learning. We can't have decolonization. We can't have autonomy for students if we don't have pedagogical documentation, if we don't have our own organization. So that's very important shit, right? First of all, I'd like to talk about having drive versus local storage organization, right? Because today we can store things on our computers and we can store things on drives, right? Like on Google Drive. So I would love to see what's going on here. So if you use Google Drive as your main storage thing, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then the rest of you, do you use local storage or do you use like paper or nothing?
I teach using Notion. Notion.
Hmm. Okay.
I use it to teach, and everything is there. And I
Okay.
can access whenever I have internet. So
Cool. So it's like a drive situation. I would say that that's not Google Drive, but it's still like an online cloud thing, right? So yeah, I know a lot of teachers that use Notion. How about you, Michelle? What do you use?
I also use Google Drive.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't see your hands.
No, I was supposed to raise here, but I was like, okay, here.
Don't worry. So that's the thing, right? I think that first things first, things should normally be online. I see a lot of teachers are trying to take notes physically, or they already have mixed systems, and I just find that that's not sustainable over time, because like notes, physical notes, they become a fucking mess. We lose them. There's no integration. It's not easy to open, to access. So like to be honest, I don't even have paper here on my desk. I don't even have pens. I don't have pencils. I don't expect everyone to be like that, because I think maybe there's one thing that you like to take notes using paper, but in general, I would say if you can put it in a Google Doc, if you can put it in a Notion thing or whatever, I'll say to Google Doc, but Louisa, you could understand Notion too. If you could put that there and have it there, easy access, you can open it. Imagine one day your computer breaks out of nothing, and then you need to use someone else's computer. If you don't have a drive situation, a cloud situation, how the fuck are you going to access your stuff? So you've got to have like a Google Drive or some kind of cloud where you're putting your stuff that you can open anytime, right? Then I go into class logs, people. Class logs are something that I used to think was like bullshit. I used to think I didn't. And you can also share easily. Very good point, Louisa. Class logs are something that I used to think was kind of bullshit. I was lazy to do it. But then when I started doing it, I started understanding the importance of it. So, what is a class log? A class log is a simple little doc where I put what we did each class and where I take notes of little things that I think are worthy of me remembering or necessary. And I would say the least intimacy, like the less intimacy I have with a student, the more I write in our class logs. So I can have more material in case I need to think about them, in case I need to plan a class when I have to have ideas. For example, this is my student Vitor's class log. Vitor is like a 17-year-old kid, and he's like very privileged and all that. We have a little bit of disconnection if we're going to look at it like logistically speaking. So I feel like I have to take a lot of notes with him so I can really like know what to bring into class. So I write down anything that we're having a conversation about that jumps at me. I'm going to write it down so I could be inspired. So then when it's time for Victor's class, I open his doc immediately and I'm like, okay, this is what I can talk about with him. So look, everything he needs to work on: prepositions. He loves American movies, politics, law, all of that, nutrition. And look here, communism. Do you guys remember I had a slide about communism these days? Like that class came from this class log because I was about to teach him. I didn't know what the fuck to talk about with him. So I was like, communism, communism, communism. Yes, let's make a class about that. So if I'm going to have a dynamic, easy prep, I need to have a place where I can just go and look at what's happening. And then here, I write down exactly what we did in class, the no-shows. So then it's easy when I'm going to do the math of how many classes his mom owes me. I can just look here, count, and I'm good to go. I put the slide links, right? Whenever I copy and paste a link here, they give me the option to put it here as a chunk. And I like to put it here as a chunk instead of a link because then it looks pretty, right? So we have it here. We have conversations, the things we talk about, girl he's dating, his ex acting up, going out with friends. And it's funny because then when I take notes of things that are significant, for example, this student here, I write like things that are, she has a new role at work. And then here I was looking down, she was talking about the a merge at her company. So then whenever she mentions something in a conversation, I could easily go and control F in the document and say, oh, when did she talk about, I don't know, someone suiciding? And then I could go back and look here and I was like, oh yeah, I remember when you said blah, 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 blue. So it's easy to do that. When I'm talking about like a group, right? Let me open a group class log. I don't know maybe what I'm going to teach today to this group. Did I ever teach a class about anxiety? Control F, anxiety, and then automatically I see it here. Yes. So I did this in August. Okay. So easy peasy lemon squeezy. I think this is stuff that is kind of obvious, but maybe isn't. So I love to talk about this, to show this. So, and so class logs are a thing. And each student of mine, normally, when there are intermediate to advanced or maybe A2 level, I already start a notebook with them. So a notebook is, they have access to it. It's a link that we both can edit, right? And then anytime they make a mistake that maybe they're too excited for me to correct because they're just like talking, or even something that's reoccurring, I write it down here. And I create this table, I insert this table, right, with two sides because this side is for us to correct things. So we come back later, and I ask him, hey, Leo, for make a trip, what do you think is wrong in this sentence? And then he's like, oh, I don't never know if it's 4 or 2, teacher. And then we talk about 2 and 4. And then I'm saying, okay, so now what do you think it is here? So he corrects himself. So it's really cool to have this notebook. The ideal situation would be that whenever I make a correction, they write things down. Or maybe they correct this right after class. They come here and they look at their mistakes. But does that really happen? No. But you can always ask your student, what format would you like this to be in? How would you like to do this? Do you think I should take notes of the mistakes so we can correct them together? Would you like to take notes? I like to ask my student how they view that happening, right? So Isabella, my student, she said that she wanted a correction part, the corrected, where we would write things down, and a column for new words. But she never Control C, Control V's the words from the chat or writes anything down here. I'm not going to do that for her, but it's there, right? Because this is her notebook. This is her thing. Whenever she wants to write things down here, she does. And then this just makes my life pretty easy because, yes, Amanda, please feel free. Amanda, did she raise her hand now or was it already up?
Was already up.
Okay, sorry, man.
It's okay, I'm sorry.
Please feel free to raise your hand anytime you have a question, okay, people? So this thing just really makes my life pretty easy because whenever I have a class, okay, so suppose I'm starting my new day. It's a fresh day here at my office, and I just turned on my computer, right? So I have here on my little sidebar here, I have my own web navigator already. So I open a new window, let's say, right? Whenever I open this new window, I look at what classes I have during that day. So I come here and I already open, look, Google Calendar and then WhatsApp. I open Google Calendar and I see the classes that I have on that day and said, okay, I'm going to teach Gabiesi, right? So I come here and I just type Gabi Essie. And I have here her notebook, her class log, and her Google Meet link all saved in my favorites already, right? They're here saved in my little favorites bar. So, okay, I put Gabi Essie here. When you click with this part here on your mouse, it opens in a new window, right? So I just click here, open a new window, new window, new window, okay? And then I have Meet open here. When it opens, if I'm not going to teach her yet, I just go Control E, Control D, and that turns off my camera, right? And my microphone and whatnot. So I come here, oops, and I turn it off. And then I go about and I look at my calendar and I see, okay, who else am I going to teach today? Are you guys following me? I think it may be froze a little bit here. But anyways, and then I'm going to teach Leonardo. So I do the same thing. I go and I open Leonardo's thing in another window. So sometimes at the beginning of the day, I already open everyone that I'm going to teach and I have like 7 windows open, each of them with their little class log thing. And then this makes it so easy for me to just come here and look at what I've been doing with Gabi and say, okay, um, we need to talk about social media, we need to cover ordinal numbers, and we need to practice some interviews with ChatGPT. We also made this list of things that we need to work on before she gets a job in Berlin where she's living. So it makes it pretty easy for me to just start my life and start my day and plan all my classes. So sometimes it takes 5 minutes tops to plan a class just because I have everything, where it needs to be. So I'd love to know, before we go into any other thing, how you guys are currently feeling about your own organization, if it's easy for you, if you have any questions, suggestions, challenges, please feel free to raise your hands and to speak. Anyone? Okay. Hello, Jules, please speak.
So, usually on my organization, I tend to make a month plan. Are you guys following me? Because I feel
Yeah.
like it's okay. So I make a month plan, but sometimes I take some notes on the student, just like you told us. But isn't like there's a specific like each day I can make a note, and I think just I really like what you did, what you showed us. It since it's already planned, it makes a little bit easier, but sometimes we can just follow up to what's planned. Sometimes you have to change, and in order to change, me having these notes on the old classes on what we have seen, it's like is something that is literally gonna change my classes now on.
That's interesting because, each one of us maybe is going to do things in a different way. But then when we see how each of us do things, we're like, I like that. Or maybe that's not for me. Oh, I love that. Oh, no, hell no, I would never do that. So, of course, I showed you guys what I'm doing, but you can feel free to do your own thing. And about planning, are you guys seeing me? Because, like, I'm frozen to me, but I feel like, can you hear me? You can hear me, right? Okay, but
We
not
can
see.
hear you, but you're frozen. Just the video, but we can hear you perfectly. Now
There
you're
you
back.
go. Okay, I restarted my
Now you're back.
camera. Beautiful. So, about planning a month long of classes. You'll see in the other meetings why and how, but I never plan classes with that much of advance. Like it never happens and it isn't really necessary. But I would say that when I was in the beginning of my teaching career, I think it was Louis Armstrong, the jazz guy, or Benny King, or someone that is from the jazz industry, that was saying how improv requires so much mastery. For you to just improvise and do something, you need to really know your shit, right? You really need to know what you're doing. So I think that's a skill that comes with time. But then when we think of knowing our student and knowing them really well, I think then it becomes easier to plan classes for them also, you know? So I think that's a thing, because honestly, if I were to plan a month long of class, that wouldn't contemplate how my student changes each week. Because my student is going to be one different person every week. There's going to be things happening every week. They're going to have different needs every week. So sometimes I plan in the beginning of the month, but then that would maybe not be so useful because things just really change a lot, you know? And then if we're going to have that versatility, then we maybe shouldn't be planning so much in advance, because plans maybe make us feel like we need to follow something, and that if we don't, we're wrong because, oh, I didn't do my planning, so I failed. Like, no, if things went off rail and even so they were productive and the students spoke and they learned, then I think that is a lot better than ultimately having followed a plan. Jules?
Yeah, so this is actually one of my struggles with planning, because I can plan it a lot, but sometimes when I don't use it, I can go to like another totally different place. And I'm like, oh my God, I just changed everything and I'm gonna have to like have two works from like, yeah, it's like freaking. But I mean, right now, I'm trying to figure out something between this and what I'm doing, because I really like planning. Is like having like a map of what I have to do. I have to teach him that and this, and um, I know this student struggles with that, so I have to put this in this month. No misses. So I'm trying to think about something right now. At the same time, I'm listening to you.
Yeah, it's something that comes through time, but I would say that most students, they have reoccurring problems. Like the problem that I see in one student, my student probably needs, the other student probably needs to cover too. So you know that fucking have instead of there to be, that is a fucking cancer. Like that spreads like like half a girl there's like, no, is there is a girl there, you know? But and so whenever I plan something about there to be, I know that I'm going to use it on a shit ton of students. And that's why I like to keep my class planning very general. If you look at the classes on my spreadsheet, you'll see that they could be used with any type of human being on earth. Like, you know, like they're very versatile. You could just open it with any person and you would still find it useful, because in general when you're learning a language you have kind of the same challenges. Like we tend to observe over time that that's a thing. Pauline?
Sorry.
Were you gonna say something? Does anyone else have anything to say, ask, share about their organization or what they're thinking? What's in your head right now? Rebecca?
Yes, I really liked what you just showed. The how do you call it? The class log. That was amazing. But I kind of struggle with this thing that I need to listen my student carefully, and I also need to type at the same time. Really, that's a struggle during my classes, because I really like to listen to my students carefully and show them that I'm really paying attention. Because sometimes during the conversation, we go deep, and I like to show them that I'm really paying attention, that it is important for me, that, okay, I'm listening so that they can open up more.
Mm.
So that's a struggle that I'm trying um to figure right now, like how can I do that? Really, I don't know if you guys feel the same. It's hard to listen and type at the same time. But I also have a question. So, for example, whenever we are having a conversation and your student asks, teacher, how can I say, no, teacher, how can I say encolher? Just one example.
Mhm.
And how do you guys do that? I saw you talking about corrections a little bit via on your Instagram, but I try to use the chat and sometimes I try to just talk. I don't know if it really works because they keep asking the same questions like a few times later. They keep asking the same vocabulary again and again. So I don't know if it really works. How do you guys do that during the classes?
Oh, well, as everything, I would say students are as much of a part of the learning journey as we are, right? It's like 50-50. So we need to talk to them about that. I always ask them, when you ask me a word, what do you think we should do about it? Should I type it in the chat for you? Do you want me to, type it in so you could like write it down? Or do you think you should control C, control V this in another doc? Do you want me to send this to you on WhatsApp before the class ends? And then you put it in a notebook? What do you think we could do about this? Because, like, if we just type things in the chat, that's Mary, right? They just, oh, it's beautiful. Just, repeat whatever the teacher sent in the chat and then never look at again. It's like it's not going to be useful for all students. Some students, they're magical. You type it in the chat, they're never going to forget that word ever again. But others, they just will not remember. So I was like, I think I already told you this word. Can you scroll back up in the chat and take a look? Or a few classes ago, I think I told you this. Remind them that we have been there before. So they kind of not feel embarrassed, but they're kind of like, oh, okay, so I need to get my shit together here. I need to do something about it. 'Cause sometimes we put everything in our hands. We put everything in our hands and we think we're the ones responsible for this whole journey. But who wants to learn the words? We already know the words, don't we? They need to learn the words. So how are they going to do it? Right? So I think that's a big part of it. And about listening and typing. I think that is tricky because I don't like people to notice that I'm typing. That's a thing. I don't like people to notice that I'm typing because then I feel like when you're at therapy and the therapist writes shit down in your in their notebook and you're like, what are you writing down? Are you writing down that I'm a freak or something? Or I'm afraid of them thinking, oh my God, I'm making a mistake, aren't I? Because you're writing shit down. So I don't like that. The class log where I put what happened in the day, I do that after classes. So it's very brief because I just put what we talked about after we've talked about it, like what popped out to me. Unless it's an idea, a class idea that I have during a conversation, then I jump to the class and I can just write it down really quick in one word so I will remember what it is. So it's like you developing your own communication system with yourself where you don't need to be prolix. Like you know what you're thinking, right? So if you write down one word, do you think maybe that word will be enough? And normally for me, it is. If I just see one word about the situation, I'm going to remember the whole context and I'm going to be like, but it's about you finding out what works for you. But yeah, it is tricky to listen and type. And I don't like to do that either. But I just like, over time, maybe we're having a deep conversation, but I've like acquired this ability of going into autopilot. So like I'm having a deep conversation and I'm participating and I'm asking very meaningful questions, but I'm not really there maybe sometimes completely. So I have the brain space to type things in. So the students speaking, I'm just making faces. I'm making really good faces that match what they're saying. And that's like a legit thing I do. Like, cause they're telling me something and it sounds like anxious. And I'm like, so I go through the tone of their voice. Cause in reality, I think this is controversial, but maybe we shouldn't be so emotionally involved with our students in the sense of feeling deeply what they feel. We should listen like therapists, but we're not involved in that situation. They're not our friends in the end of the day, I saw that when I went on maternity leave. Like I took 15 days after my baby was born. And I thought, oh, I think my students we talk so deeply about things, have such awesome conversation. I think they're my friends. So they're probably going to pay those 15 days that I'm not working, right? They did not pay. They were not like, oh, my teacher just had a baby. It's so hard to have a baby and come back to work. I'm going to help her. I'm going to send her a present. Not that they owe me that, but we create those expectations if we get emotionally entangled. So I would say don't. I would say develop the ability of listening, of asking meaningful questions, regardless of the situation. I think we're going to cover that in the next meetings, but like, that's a very important thing to like know how to be do two things at the same time, because you're not that in the conversation, but it comes through practice. Deep shit.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Amanda?
I just want to share something first with Rebecca. Rebecca, I work in a bilingual, not a bilingual school, but a school that has a bilingual program. And my students, when they have a struggle to memorize or really understand how to use a grammar or a vocabulary in specific, I ask them, uh, what is your art? What can you do to work with your artistic side? Some of them like make music. They like to write rap songs and on guitar songs. Some of them like to paint with watercolor. Some of them like to make the like manga, like a Japanese type of book. I don't know the name in English, but I asked them to make an art about that vocabulary or about that grammar in specific, and that helps a lot because they can like put the knowledge in other space in their brain. And in sometimes I try very hard to make a class with impact, but sometimes I can't, and sometimes it doesn't work the way that I try to do. But when they do that, I feel that they internalize that knowledge in the other way that I can reach. So maybe it's a good way for you to try. Like, what is your art? How can we work with the other side of your brain so you can connect two things? So maybe it's a good thing for you to try. And my question, Bia, was when you start with a student, do you have like a placement test, like to know like the personal things, what you like to do, what you want to talk about here in their classes? Okay, but a placement test to understand about grammar, about the level. And do you plan your activities based on the placement test or only on the personal interest of both? Or I don't know.
Absolutely all awesome questions. I love them. I just before that, I'm writing things down here so I don't lose track. But about the memory thing, spot on what you said. And maybe like our students would be adults and they wouldn't like want to make a song or paint watercolor about it, but asking them how they want to memorize things, how they can connect that knowledge and memorize it more deeply. That is perfect, Amanda. That is exactly what we should be doing. Asking them, how do you connect with this? And that's why I love to bring classes that are about real things and for students to talk about their real experiences, because then it's more memorable in general. But we can't expect them to memorize a word for just seeing it once. So maybe we are going to have to tell a student a word more than once. Maybe we're going to have to remind them more than once. But if they are having contact with the language, if they're using the language in context, then they'll probably see that word more than once, and then when that happens, they'll memorize it. So there's really just no magic trick to do it, because rarely a person listens to a word once and they're going to remember it, right? So yeah, they need to take it deeper. And about placement tests, well, I used to do that. I used to like in the beginning of in the beginning, at some point of the interview, like in the beginning of my student's journey with me, I would have like a test. I call it an OPI, oral proficiency interview. But now I really don't do that anymore for a few reasons. Because I see our journey together as more linear, in the sense of we have continuity. We have a journey to go down together. So we don't need to rush and do everything in the first class. Like, I don't want to know everything about the student in the first class. I don't want to know exactly what their English is in the first class. I want to understand what their anxiety with English is, how willing they are to learn, about the more philosophical stuff, how I work, how, what I expect from them, the agreements that we're also going to talk about. That's something I wanted to bring in that is about organization. Is in the first class, in the first interview, I talk to them about, like, what happens, how do you stop classes, how do you take vacations, with how much time of advance do you need to let me know, are we going to have a notebook, or are we not going to have a notebook, do you like homework or do you hate homework, what is boring to you, what is lovely to you, what type of, that more that kind of stuff. And then in the first official class, that's not the interview, I'll maybe have that slide where I ask 21 questions about the person. There's that in my lesson, in my lesson spreadsheet. But it's like, what kind of music do you like? Do you prefer beaches or mountains? And they're questions that any level of English could answer. And then according to the answer they give, I start to notice what their level is, because I feel like doing that in the first interview is a lot for the student. They maybe get super nervous. So I like to take the edge off, and I like to bring it into a real class, an official class we're going to have. I like to feel how they are in a real conversation. So we're talking about beaches or mountains. If they say, oh, I like beach because sand. Oh, I like beach because sun. I don't like mosquitoes, nature. Then I say, okay, this person's English is very basic. Like, oh my God, I love the beach. I'm absolutely obsessed, And then I say, oh, the person has like a good level of English here. I know what I'm working with. So I do it through conversations. My classes all give me a better notion. I'm continuously assessing how my students' English is based on the answers that they're giving me. So no, I don't have a placement test in the beginning, because I don't even like the word tests. I don't use that word. I think I've never used that word in classes in the past, like 5 to 6 years teaching.
Me neither, but I was asking that because last year I met my students to take Cambridge exams, and it was like um tiro no escuro because I don't have a Cambridge exams certificate, so I never had this experience before, and I got the training and everything. And this year I thought that maybe it was nice to start the year knowing where my students are in the English level. Because if the school asks for prep, I can start okay. I know where they are because last year I didn't. So I did that, and I'm trying to do some tests like one per month. I don't like the word test either, and I don't give them like the responsibility or the pressure of a test. It's just like let's analyze in numbers because this is like a school requirement and I need to follow through, but not exactly how I like to do things. And surprisingly, I feel that it's nice to see numbers, but I am an analytical person. My students aren't, and they are very immature for that. So if I start working with adults, maybe it would be better to see that with them, like to analyze numbers and the progression. I don't know. That's why I was asking, but your view.
Yeah, I think that when you're working in quantity, when you're working with a class, then I think grades start to be maybe necessary, because schools are not ready to assess people in other ways. But I absolutely will always defend that tests are not the best way to assess people. I think that, for example, if I have a student that they want to get ready for the Cambridge exam, which I don't like getting, but sometimes comes a person that says, "Oh, I want to get ready for TOEFL or some shit like that." I say, "Okay, I'm gonna send you a practice test, and then you could do it in your downtime, and then we correct it together maybe, but I'm never going to ask them to do that in class, because in our class I want to have time to speak to them, to listen to them speaking English, so then I can really assess them for their language production. Because some people are really good test takers. Being a good test taker does not mean that you speak English well. So that's a big thing that I see. Sometimes a person can do really well in a Cambridge exam, but then when it's time to really speak, they don't have fluency. So that's why I also don't like or condone tests, because I feel like it doesn't really say a lot, because language is language and numbers are numbers. And then I think that it's kind of like, we can be analytical, but I would say that numbers are not the best way to measure language. I would say that linking words are a good way to be analytical about fluency. I would say that prepositions are a good way. Verb tenses are a good way to be analytical. And then we could maybe have a checklist if we're gonna really, assess our students in a big classroom environment. Maybe once per semester, whenever you need to, you could have a checklist, and you're like putting down points for how much they're talking in the past, or if they're using present perfect correctly, if they're using linking words, and then assess it through that instead of having like a test that they're taking. But maybe that's a school requirement, so I don't know. Okay. Pauline?
Uh, well, I'd like to say that I loved the idea, Amanda, of telling them to uh, show their arts in a way that they could connect with the new vocabulary. This is amazing. I'm gonna try it. Well, the way I do it, sometimes I use it very I use it very often. Write down the words that were new or new expressions, and I always see it in front of me, and I use it with my students. I used to write it down on the chat, but something that is, I was actually talking to my teacher last semester, which was my last semester in university. It wasn't about English classes, but chemistry classes, and he said that students are losing the habit of writing down and making notes, and I started to. And I noticed that it's true because my students don't have this habit. So I decided to start telling them to make notes, so then they have their own notes. I'm always asking, like, in a good way, of course, hey, are you noting? Making notes? Write it down. It's important. This is nice. Create a sentence with this new word. So then I put them to create a sentence and see how it works in a real situation or whatever. But I'm always bringing it back in next classes because I have it here in front of me. This is how it worked for me. It works for me this way, but I loved your idea. I'm probably gonna use it. And about making notes without being noticed. I usually use my phone right here in front of the screen, so then I'm making the notes and they don't really see it because I'm looking at the same point as in the whole class. So I use
Sneaky bitch. I love it.
yeah. So yeah, I think that's it.
I love it. That's classical. And about like the notebook situation, for fuck's sake, like when a student starts classes, you're gonna think, okay, I'm gonna start a class, I'm gonna buy a notebook, blah blah blah, blah, blah. But no, they just don't think about it. It's just surprising how they don't even think about taking notes. So then maybe when I start sending them things in the chat, I ask them, so what are we gonna do with these words? And before finishing the class, I'm like, okay, what are we gonna do with this? What are we gonna do? Right? Do you have notebook? No? Oh, do you think you would like to use that? Do you think you prefer to take physical notes, or you prefer to have it online? I like asking those types of questions because some students, they really need to write it down. And it's like, okay, it takes a long time for them to be writing shit down. I need to wait, but whatever. If they like it, they like it. Others, they're like super digitally fluent. So they're like, pa, 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 and that's good. So asking them questions, because I don't like to tell my student things. I think that when you tell a person to do something, they very usually will continuously do it. They very rarely will continuously do it. They will do it maybe once, they'll do it maybe twice whenever we ask them. But if it doesn't truly come from them, I feel like there's no. So I like to ask people, like, oh, maybe once a month, I'm like, so have you been taking notes? What have you been doing with your notes? How's your notebook been? Let me see. Let me take a little look. Do you think there's anything interesting that you've been taking notes of usually? Like, Or at the end of the class, there was this student that I asked, "Can you tell me 5 words that you wrote down today?" Because he was like a lazy ass motherfucker. It was a teenage dirtbag. And then I was just like, so, what words did you write down today? Could you tell me like your favorite words that you learned today in class? And then he would be like, okay, okay, okay. There you go. Good. You got it. Or do you think you could make a sentence with one of these? Do you think of any sentences? Or maybe you could do that in your downtime. He never did. So anyways, not my responsibility either because I'm prompting him to do things and he's not, so like his loss, right? He's the one paying class or his mom for that matter. But it's a thing. We do need to incentivize them because it's not natural. Like Paula said, like you gotta go for it. You gotta ask them to do it in the sense of like, are you? What are you gonna do? How are we gonna do this? You know, because they just don't have that initiative. Julia, your hand is up. Are you frozen?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
there you go.
frozen.
You're back.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you
I
hear
can.
me? Okay. So I was just gonna ask about it. What would be my part as a teacher? Because sometimes I feel like sending them, it's like a way to support it, the idea, to write it down. Sometimes I tell them to write, but if I know they're not writing, so ask them to show me, like with kids I ask them to show me, but some kids don't even try. And what would be my part, my responsibility to like support this writing down thing? Because for me this is really important. I write everything down. This the only way it works for me. So I think it is a way. Not everybody works this way, but it is a way, and I would like my students to act this way also, because I know it works. People have their own ways to understand. And this is another thing that you said about having my own communication with students. And that is a huge slap, because I always talk with my friends, with my students, about self-awareness before trying to speak another language, because this way I'm gonna understand what is my vocabulary. And this is really important at this job too, at this work, at this life, because if I don't know myself, if I don't understand not just my vocabulary, but what way I want to teach, what are the things that I want to teach, what is the things that I want to talk about, and I want my students to know and learn with me, and they can teach me also what are the yeses and what are the nos. And just like, oh my god, I'm talking about it all the time, and I never thought about it. I never actually used it. And I yeah, another thing was about when the student doesn't do the things, like you were talking about the evaluations and not homework, but doing exercises at the class. And sometimes I have to deal with students not doing homeworks or writing exercises at home. So I say, okay, I'm done. We're gonna do it in class. We're losing the class because you're not doing this. How other way I cannot lose a class and make him do this? Like, is there something to do about it?
I think we'll cover a lot of that on autonomy, but what I would say from now on is like our responsibility as teachers is to start that conversation, is to prompt them to think, is to ask them the questions that help them look inside of themselves so they can assess those things that you're mentioning. Because, for example, I have a student that he has lectured me extensively about how humans are becoming lazy because they are using too much, how did he call it? Artificial memory. So, which is taking notes. So he doesn't believe in taking notes because he believes in the power of his brain, and he thinks that if he takes notes, his brain is gonna become lazy. He's a coach freak, anyways, but like he doesn't believe in notes. So if I told him, "Yo, are you taking notes?" that wouldn't work for him. So I love asking students, like, "Are you a note-taking person? How do you memorize things best?" I
Yeah.
love asking students questions to get to know them so they can get to know themselves too. Because often people don't stop and reflect about that because they had a very passive sort of education where they maybe could cheat on tests or just memorize shit. I am honestly the type of person that in school, my notes were very precarious. They were just words. My notes were just words, word lists, basically. Because my ADHD is like a superpower and like an autistic superpower almost, because it's like I look at the word and I remember what I was thinking about. So if someone looked at my notes, they would be like, this girl is like a fucking mess. But then on a test, I would get an A plus. So, and I'm not the type of person that studies. I've never been the type of person that did homework. Fuck me about homework. I hate homework. And honestly, I think that my students don't have time for homework. They like whenever you hear the word homework or you hear the word assignment, that just automatically doesn't hit well with them because I teach like some busy ass people. So I would also say like manage your expectations and like I think that it has to be practical, very practical, maybe you only speak to the student in English on WhatsApp. Maybe you ask them to you say, oh, today let's have 5 minutes of conversation only in the chat. We're gonna have to try to talk in the chat only for 5 minutes, or then let's write a story together. Or like I had a student, we had an anime project, so we created our own anime story. We created the characters, we created like the plot and everything, the characteristics. He drew the characters and everything. So that was my way of working on writing with him. Another student, he loved soccer, so we created a manual of sports of soccer together. So writing down the rules, writing down how it works, how many players you need, and everything. So each person has a different thing that where they could use, writing, or maybe not. Maybe, their thing with them is just going to be speaking and speaking and speaking. But you have to ask them what their priority is. Because if their priority is learning how to write and they're not writing, then fuck me, right? So they got to know their priority so then they could do things accordingly. Because if my students' objective is to speak English, maybe they don't care about how they write. Maybe they don't care about how they read. Reading, obviously, I think is like a consequence because sometimes we're going to read articles together or whatever, but maybe they don't want to work on writing, and that's fine. I'm not here to obligate them because I don't believe in making them do things. Of course, it would be ideal. Of course, everyone needs to practice writing in a language to get good at it. But like, what am I going to do? I can't lose a class. I would say I would never lose precious communication time writing things down and doing things, because then that's just like heavy. Because I don't want my student to think about me and think about the homework they didn't do. I hate that when they come into class already apologizing. That is fucking annoying to me. Well, oh, teacher, nem fiz, hein? Já vou avisando que nem fiz. Ah, mas se lascar, tá ligado? Oh, eu lá quero saber, a lição de casa é pra você, não pra mim, truta. Oh, se liga. Não fez, não fez. Eu não tenho nada a ver com isso. It's for you. I always say, you don't need to apologize to me. Why would you apologize to me? You could apologize to yourself if you want, but like, because it's for you. It's for you. It's not for me. I speak English. And I say that to them because we have that sort of relationship where I'm real with them about their responsibility. And that's something that in the first meeting, I'm very clear about. I put them against the wall and I say, this is what it takes to learn English. Are you ready for this shit? And so maybe they just want to pay me money without doing shit. But then I'm not going to waste my time because it's so fucking boring to do writing in class together or do exercises in class. Like, so, I kind of just adjust my expectations in that sense. Does that make sense to you guys? Does that make sense, Julia?
Yes, yes. That makes a lot of sense.
Because I think we have this idea of what students need to be doing. We have like a checklist in our mind, but then they should know, right? They should figure that out for themselves, or else we're just dictating things and telling them how they should behave and whatnot. And then that's passive. Everything that we do, people, everything that you do with your students should be thinking of autonomy, right? Everything. It's like giving a person a diet versus reeducação alimentar, versus changing the way they eat, their relationship with food, We're not out here giving them diets, because the minute that they go off the diet, which is having classes with us, then they're going to derail, and they need to be learning English forever. So they can't depend on me. They can't depend on me giving them writing tests. Fuck, if they want to practice their writing, they could write a text. I always say, if you want to practice your writing, feel free to write a text and send it to me. If you want, I can give you some writing prompts too. You could use ChatGPT to give you writing prompts. You could use Tweak. I even showed them Tweak. So like, you have a lot of options of things to offer students, but I don't think that everything needs to go through us, because they're autonomous in their learning journey too. Fuck, they could write a text and give it to ChatGPT and then have it correct, it correct what they wrote. And then they're like reflecting on comparing what they wrote versus what ChatGPT corrected. And then they could learn through that. But we need to provoke them in that sense. We need to incentivize them towards autonomy. And that's something that we seldom have access to ourselves. So I get that challenge. Does anyone else have anything to add or to say or to ask? Abner?
Oh, can I start?
Please.
So it's really hard to me because I feel like I give everything to the students. I mean, I use Trello. I don't know if you guys know the Trello platform. So it's a way that we can work together, like me and the student. And I literally do like checklists with like the days of the week. So something that they should do, and it's just like a suggestion. It's just like something that they should do, and in the class they don't feel like guilty for not doing or something. Like they like actually to have something like, I don't know, pre-ordered to them, to I feel like they like it. So it works to me, it works to my students, especially because I have the student as a focus on my teaching. So like each student have a specific activities. So I plan the activities, and like normally I do this on weekend, and then everything is ready for the whole week. And it's changing. It's like it's able, I can change everything if I need to, if I feel like, okay, maybe I had planned for this week something that it's not going to work with this specific student, but yeah, I have something planned and it's working for me. And but I do believe autonomy is something that I seek to teach them, and I always talk about this in the class. Like, okay, you have something prepared, but how about you looking for yourself some article that you may like it, or I show them some things that they could do in their daily routine. Like, okay, let's learn today with using music, and I take the lyric and I teach them how to do, because our relation with languages taught us how to study more or less, or the best way to acquire the language. So I feel like I teach my students how to do the same thing. And like if they like the activity, maybe they are going to do by themselves, but we needed to teach the autonomy too, because a lot of us don't really think about it, or we just simply don't have it like in our life. So yeah, that's how I do.
Thank you for sharing. But you know what? It immediately pops out to me that you're doing shit on the weekends. And that's like a huge no, fucking no. Everything, people, everything that we do out of classes for our students comes out of the amount that we receive per hour from them. So if they pay me 100 per hour and I spend half an hour, or I spend an hour preparing their class, then it's actually worth 50 per hour. So I love to think of that math. And then, like, I think that it's impossible to give people autonomy when you're also spoon feeding them. I think it was Piaget that said, they say you should never bite the hand that feeds you, but maybe you should if that hand is stopping you from feeding yourself. So I would say that if you are spoon feeding them, they will never, BLW. Have you ever heard of BLW? Baby feeding stuff, baby led weaning. It's like, instead of giving kids papinha, mashed food, you give them pieces of fruit and you let them, because then that develops their curiosity, their relationship with the food, instead of having a bunch of mushed shit together that they just ingest. I feel like whenever we give them a lot of stuff, we're making a papinha. It's very nutritious. It will keep them alive and healthy. But then how much are they involved in the actual developing relationship with the study thing? Because most of the teachers that I know that are awesome, and many of them are here in this meeting, are self-taught, self-fucking taught. So nobody spoon-fed them. Who spoon-fed your ass? You know? Nobody spoon fed your ass. And then you speak English super fucking well because you went after it. And today you still study. Today you still have contact with the culture. So I think it can't be contrary. Like you start, you're spoon fed, and then eventually you go towards autonomy. Like you need to start with autonomy. You need to start with curiosity, because let's be honest, like if you don't have the drive to really make English a part of your life, I'm sorry, but you're never going to really learn English. You can have classes with me, but you're never going to learn English on your own. And then it's what I said, like about the diet versus teaching a person, re-signifying their relationship with food. So absolutely get what you're doing, and I think it's beautiful. I've been there, I've done that, but I would say that it's coming out of your paycheck in the end of the day. And then you're not getting so many like it's not an advantage for either of you, either for your student or for you in the end of the day. But it makes us feel that we are doing something for them, and I think that we have this need to like to see that that there's some kind of continuity, and but then they don't go after things. They need to go after things on their own. But I think that you could ask them questions and help them establish a routine. Whenever a student comes to me and they say, "Oh man, can you make me a study plan?" I'm like, "Okay, next class we're gonna make the study plan together, right?" Then next class I'm like, "Okay, what are we gonna use to write down your study plan? Are you gonna use Google Doc? You're gonna use a spreadsheet? Are you gonna use a slide? What are you gonna use? Paper? Okay. So how many times a week do you think you can have time to have contact with English? Nice. Okay. What do you like to do? What are you interested in? Okay. What if you did this? How about that, teacher? Oh, that's a good idea. What if you did that and then did this?" Like we sit down with them and we establish an autonomous study plan for them. But like spoon feeding them, I don't know. It's exhausting for us. It's exhausting because we need to think of the things, but you already speak English, Abner. Don't you? But how do you feel about me saying this? I hope I didn't cross a line or anything.
Yeah, I'm constantly thinking because I feel like I'm doing the opposite thing that the whole group is like vibing to it, but at the same time that's good because made me think about what I'm doing in this work. But I really never thought about it in this way, so like I'm still digesting, but I agree with you. At the same time, I don't know what to do. So I feel like it's been working to me, like, and to my students too, to show them like pieces of what I've been done, like to really talk in English in the way I speak nowadays. Um, so yeah, I am self-taught, as you mentioned. Like I've been learning by myself for a long period of my life. I took like just 2 years of a regular course in Wizard. We all know Wizard here in Brazil, but was a good foundation, but it was where all starts. But I'm still nowadays. Do you guys are hearing me? Because I feel like my connection is
Yeah, perfectly.
okay.
Perfect.
Perfectly. Okay. So what was a good foundation, but all the things that I can say, like, okay, I talk in English very good right now because I've been teaching myself how to do so. So listen to people talking in English. I'm so into interviews. I love like seeing people in their normal life, just answering questions. That's really was something that helped me to talk in English in a good way. So I try to pass this. I try to pass the fruit, to my students, like this way you should do. And I hope you find a good path. So I'm working like a guide more than a teacher. Like I don't teach the language. I teach in some periods of my class. Like if I see it's important to this student, I'm going to teach you something. But I like more to have a conversation and just sometimes the students just need to have somebody else to chat and to have a reference because they don't have this in their daily lives. And the thing that I'm doing with Trello is just like give them a opportunity to think about language in their daily life because they naturally will not do it. So if I'm making them do this initially, maybe in the future they can go by themselves. And actually, I can talk about it in my classes. So it's like a continuous progress. So yeah,
I
I'm
get
thinking
that.
about all those things.
Well, you should stay tuned, obviously, to the next meeting. So we will be covering that, the one about student-led learning and the one about autonomy and metacognition. People, metacognition is where the fucking sauce is. So I would say that is a good meeting for you to like, really digest everything. You'll go along the way, but I would say also that like um why do we need to guide them so much? Because they were all like raised, we are all raised in an educational system that makes us passive, that puts us in that place of waiting for people to tell us what to do. We are all born natural learning machines, like curious machines. But then slowly our educational process dumbs it down and tones it down and then makes us feel like, no, this is learning. So I think that when we work hard to access that place of natural curiosity, that is awesome, right? So I love that you're trying to incentivize your students to go towards that. And I hope that along the way you like, you know, find ways to spice up what you're doing, because I don't think that you need to abandon to totally 360 what you're doing. Like I always say, I never am a fan of saying like, oh, you need to do this. I'm saying what I do and what I believe in as an educator, and then we'll all find our own little hybrid systems along the way, with a little tad, a little spruce of what we are, who we are, and what we believe in. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your honesty, for your openness, for your vulnerability, because that takes guts, right? So thank you, my people, for joining me today. Next week, we will cover specifically that student-led learning. And let me check here. Yes, decolonization and student-led learning. So that's a hot one. That is awesome. I love that topic, and I'm excited already. So see you then, okay? Take care.
See
Kisses.
you. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.